The Imperium of man has spent 10,000 years burning people alive for even looking at alien technology. Entire worlds have been purged for the crime of trading with the Xenos. And the guy who started it all, he literally worked alongside aliens to build his empire. Today I'm breaking down the most mind-blowing revelations about the Imperium that change everything you thought you knew, starting with the Emperor's dirty little secret. The Emperor's secret friends, the Emperor of mankind, the God Emperor, the figurehead of humanity's most violently xenophobic civilization in fiction, was basically best friends with the Eldar, and I can prove it. Before you dismiss this as some fringe fan theory, hear me out. The Emperor didn't just tolerate the Eldari, he actively cooperated with them. His most ambitious project, the Imperial Webway, was an attempt to connect humanity to the Eldar's own Webway network. He studied their mastery of the warp, understood their technology, and built his entire vision for humanity's future around accessing infrastructure that Eldar had created. The gateway on Moloch? That was a portal into the warp itself, one the Emperor used to bargain for the power he needed to create the Primarchs. His strength didn't come from human ingenuity alone. Imagine finding out that your God, the being your entire church exists to worship, built his grand plan around a Xenos infrastructure, and cut deals with forces beyond comprehension. That's not a minor contradiction. That's the foundation cracking. But here's where it gets worse. The Golden Throne itself, the most sacred artifact in the entire Imperium, the divine seat that keeps the Emperor alive, and the Astronomicon burning, was designed to tap directly into the Eldar Webway. The holiest object in human civilization exists to interface with an alien network. Every single ecclesiarchy priest who has ever condemned a human for possessing Xenos relics is worshipping at a throne whose entire purpose was connecting to alien-built pathways. Here's the thing, the Imperium's foundational anti-Xenos doctrine, the ideological bedrock that has justified 10,000 years of alien purges, directly contradicts the Emperor's documented personal history. He maintained a deeper relationship with the Eldari than even Guilliman, his most diplomatically gifted son, ever managed. So the question becomes unavoidable. Was the xenophobic doctrine ever actually the Emperor's idea? Or was it constructed after his imprisonment by the men who filled the power vacuum? Men who needed a simple, violent ideology to hold a crumbling empire together. The institution that exterminates entire species in the Emperor's name was founded by a man who treated those species as partners. And nobody in the Imperium is allowed to know that. But if the Emperor's personal beliefs were this thoroughly buried, wait until you hear what his most ambitious project actually cost him. The Webway catastrophe. The Emperor of mankind was not building a weapon. He was building a road. And if it had worked, every single horror the Imperium has endured for the last 10,000 years would never have happened. The Webway project was the most ambitious engineering undertaking in human history. The concept was staggeringly simple in its ambition. Create a psychically hardened transit network beneath reality itself, one that would allow humanity to travel between stars without ever touching the warp. No demons, no navigators going insane, no ships vanishing into hell and reappearing centuries later filled with corpses. Every colony, every fleet, every world connected through stable, shielded corridors that chaos could never reach. And it was working. The Emperor had established a functioning section beneath the Imperial Palace on Terra, reinforced with his own psychic power, anchored to the ancient Eldar Webway that already threaded through the galaxy. Humanity was one completed project away from cutting its single greatest vulnerability overnight. No more warp dependency. No more feeding the Chaos Gods every time a ship made a jump. Then Magnus the Red destroyed everything. Here's the thing, Magnus didn't betray his father. He was trying to save him. He had foreseen the Horus heresy through his psychic abilities and desperately needed to warn the Emperor. But the Emperor had forbidden all psychic communication for exactly this reason, because the Webway's protections were fragile, held together by his constant concentration. Magnus ignored the warning. He forced a psychic message through the barriers, and in doing so, he shadowed them. The deepest tunnels beneath Terra flooded with warp entities. Demons poured through the breach like water through a cracked hull. The Emperor's golden robe became a dimensional wound, and the Emperor had no choice. He sat down on the golden throne and has not stood up since, not to rule, not to guide, not to be worshipped. He has spent 10,000 years holding a door shut. every ounce of his psychic power, the most powerful human mind ever to exist, consumed by one eternal task: preventing the warp from flooding upward through Terra's foundations and devouring the homeworld of humanity. The custodians, his personal guardians, tried to reclaim the compromised webway sections. Squads of the greatest warriors in the Imperium march into those tunnels. Most never return. The few bodies recovered show flesh melted into their armor, skin fused with metal, as though whatever waited on the other side of that sealed gate existed in a state where the physical and the immaterial were no longer separate things. Nobody retrieved them after that. This is the tragedy that defines the entire Imperium. Magnus destroyed the project trying to save it. The Emperor sacrificed his future trying to fix it. And for 10,000 years, trillions of humans have worshipped a prisoner as a god without ever understanding what he was actually doing. The corpse on the Golden Throne isn't ruling anything. He's frozen in a single moment of catastrophe, paying for someone else's mistake for eternity. But the Webway wasn't the only secret project the Emperor was running. And the next one might be even more disturbing because it involves something he was building with people nobody expected. Call's forbidden science. 10,000 years ago, Robout Guilliman gave a single instruction to Archmagos Belisarius Call: improve the Space Marine, make them stronger, faster, harder to kill. Simple enough, right? Here's the thing, what Call did with that instruction has zero precedent in Imperial history, and most of it was never authorized. Call didn't just improve the Loyalist gene lines, he's been working on all 20. Every single legion. That includes the 9 traitor legions, the ones that burned the Imperium to the ground during the Horus Heresy, the Sons of Horus, the Death Guard, the Emperor's children. Call has been refining, cataloging, and developing their genetic material for 10 millennia, using a device called the Sancprimus Portum, a secret repository containing genetic samples harvested directly from the Primarchs themselves. Not copies, not derivatives. The original source material from the Emperor's own sons. And what did he build with it? The Primaris Space Marines. Bigger, stronger, and fundamentally redesigned from the ground up. Standard Space Marines carry 19 gene seed organs. Primaris carry 22. 3 entirely new biological systems were added. The Magnificat, which amplifies the growth hormones from other implants to push the body beyond previous limits. The Belisarian Furnace, which floods the body with combat stimulants when it detects fatal damage, essentially letting a Primaris fight through death. And the sinew coils, metallic cables woven through the muscle tissue that make them physically stronger than any Astartes who came before them. This isn't an upgrade, it's a complete redesign of the post-human soldier. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Call has openly told Guilliman that he wants to use Traitor Legion gene seed in future Primaris development. He's not hiding it. He thinks limiting Primaris creation to only Loyalist gene lines is wasteful and scientifically irrational. Guilliman said no. Explicitly, firmly, absolutely not. And Cal has a 10,000-year track record of ignoring Guilliman's instructions whenever he finds them scientifically inconvenient. Nobody knows exactly what Cal has already done with that traitor genetic data. Nobody has audited his work. Nobody even fully understands his methods. He's been operating in near total isolation for longer than most civilizations exist, with access to the most dangerous biological material in the galaxy. The question isn't whether Call pushed boundaries. The question is how far past them he's already gone. And then there's the detail that keeps dedicated lore fans up at night. After Guilliman's resurrection, the Ultramarines experience a sudden, massive population expansion thanks to Primaris reinforcements. Suspiciously massive. Some theorists believe the gene seed of the 2 lost legions, the 2nd and 11th, whose Primarchs were erased from Imperial history entirely, may have been quietly absorbed into the Ultramarines ranks. The greatest mystery in 40,000 lore might not be lost at all. It might be hiding inside the most famous chapter in the Imperium, and Call would be the only person alive who knows the truth. If that idea unsettles you, wait until you hear what's been stirring in the warp itself. The Dark King. There is a prophecy buried in the Siege of Terra novels that, if true, rewrites everything you think you know about the Emperor of Mankind. It's not about his sacrifice, it's not about his nobility. It's about the possibility that he is the single most dangerous entity in the entire Warhammer 40k universe, and he knows it. The prophecy describes a 5th Chaos God. Not Khorne, not Nurgle, not Tzeentch, not Slaanesh. Something new, something worse. A god called the Dark King. And here's what makes it different from every other Chaos entity. It isn't born from abstract emotion or alien psychic resonance. The Dark King is born directly from human civilization itself. Every act of cruelty, every genocide, every moment of imperial horror feeding into a single point of ascension. Two candidates emerge most prominently across the lore: Horus Lupercal, the war master who nearly burned Terra to ash, and the Emperor himself, the man sitting on the golden throne. Even the demon Samus has been linked to the prophecies unfolding, a warp entity entangled with the Dark King's emergence from the very earliest days of the heresy. But here's where it gets genuinely eerie. The Emperor created a tarot deck, not a metaphorical one, an actual psychic divination tool used across the entire Imperium by theomancers and seers for thousands of years. Malcador the Sigillite himself was known to use it, and within that deck are cards labeled the Dark King, the Moon, the Tower, and the Lightning. He made these cards before the heresy, before Horus fell, before any of it happened. He had precognitive knowledge of this prophecy, possibly including knowledge about his own role in fulfilling it. Let that sink in for a second. The Emperor designed cards predicting a fifth Chaos God, and one of the candidates for that god is himself. The prophecy's terms are brutally specific. It states that the human race will die in fire, consumed by blood rage, pestilence, violent transmutation, and blind desire. Read that list again. Blood rage is Khorne. Pestilence is Nurgle. Violent transmutation is Tzeentch. Blind desire is Slaanesh. The prophecy is describing all four chaos gods consuming humanity simultaneously, and from that extinction event, the Dark King rises. Every god feeding at once, creating something none of them can control, and the Chaos Gods know this. They have taken active steps to prevent or manipulate the prophecy's outcome. The four most powerful entities in the setting, beings that corrupt stars and devour civilizations across dimensions, are afraid of what happens if the Dark King emerges. When the things that scare entire galaxies are themselves terrified of an outcome, you should be paying very close attention. Now here's the most disturbing reading of all, and I want to be clear that this is a leading theory rather than confirmed canon, because the lore is intentionally cryptic on this point. Some readers believe the Emperor didn't sacrifice himself to the Golden Throne to fight chaos. He imprisoned himself. He recognized that his own psychic power, amplified by 10,000 years of human worship and suffering, was pushing him toward exactly the kind of ascension the prophecy described. The Golden Throne isn't a life support system. It's a cage built by the prisoner himself for himself because he knew what he would become if he ever got out. The noble sacrifice narrative, that's the version the Imperium tells itself. The truth might be far darker. The Emperor may be the bomb that had to be defused, and the only person capable of defusing it was him. But the Emperor's possible future isn't the only cosmic threat the Imperium is facing. There's something new crawling out of the warp, and it doesn't play by any of the old rules. Vashtor. Every threat the Imperium has ever faced operates on logic you can understand. The Chaos Gods are driven by emotion. The Tyranids are driven by hunger. The Necrons are driven by pride and reclamation. Vashtor is driven by none of these things. And that's exactly what makes him terrifying. Vashtor is what's known as a machine entity of the warp, not a demon born from human rage or despair or excess, not a psychic echo of organic suffering. He is a god of gold and iron, a being that treats souls the way a factory treats raw materials, currency, fuel, input for production. He runs the Forge of Souls, a nightmarish industrial complex in the warp where demon engines are built, where creation itself is weaponized, and where worship doesn't look like prayer. It looks like manufacturing. Here's where it gets weird. The four Chaos Gods are, at their core, self-defeating. Khorne's rage burns everything, including his own forces. Nurgle's decay consumes his own creations. Tzeentch's plans contradict each other by design. Slaanesh's excess guarantees eventual collapse. They are powerful beyond comprehension, but they are fundamentally chaotic. They can't help it. That's the point. Emotion makes them volatile, and volatility makes them inefficient. Vashtor doesn't have that problem. He operates on pure transactional logic. He doesn't rage, he doesn't scheme for the sake of scheming, he doesn't rot, and he doesn't indulge. He accumulates, he builds, he expands, and he does it with the cold patience of something that has been doing this for longer than anyone wants to admit. Now, fair warning, Vashdor is a relatively recent addition to the lore, so the canonical depth here is thinner than what we've covered so far, but what has been revealed is genuinely unsettling. His current strategic objective involves stabilizing passages through the Great Rift, essentially creating reliable, repeatable warp corridors that would dramatically expand his operational reach across the galaxy. He's not trying to tear reality apart like the Chaos Gods. He's trying to build infrastructure through it. That's a fundamentally different kind of ambition. But here's the kicker. There's strong suggestion that Vashdor may predate the current Chaos Gods entirely. If that's true, his origin point sits somewhere at or before the collapse of the Old Ones and the War in Heaven, meaning this entity has potentially survived multiple galactic extinction events, not by being too powerful to kill, by being the kind of thing that simply doesn't die the way organic or emotional entities do. You can't starve out something that doesn't hunger. You can't outlast something that doesn't decay, and he's been manipulating both sides. Chaos forces and Imperial factions alike have been nudged into serving Vashdor's agenda without either side fully realizing it. He doesn't conquer through corruption or military force. He conquers through supply chains, through dependency, through making himself essential to everyone's war effort while quietly building something none of them can see. Think about it this way. Everything the Imperium has fought, from demons to Xenos to heretics, operates on recognizable emotional or biological logic. You can predict what Khorne wants. You can model tyrannid behavior. You can anticipate Necron territorial ambition. Vashdor is the first entity in this setting that thinks the way an actual extinction level threat probably should. No ego, no emotion, no self-sabotage. Just cold, rational, long-term accumulation of power. The Chaos Gods have spreadsheets now, and nobody in the galaxy is ready for that. But if a calculating machine god lurking in the warp sounds bad, wait until you hear what's happening to the one thing keeping the entire Imperium from collapsing overnight. The Great Rift. Everything we've talked about so far, the betrayals, the hidden threats, the slow decay, all of it was happening to a galaxy that was at least still in one piece. That's no longer the case. Around 999 M41, reality itself split open. The Cicatrix Maledictum, better known as the Great Rift, tore across the entire galaxy like a wound that will never heal. And when I say the entire galaxy, I mean it. This isn't some localized disaster or a single war zone. It's a screaming gash of warp energy stretching from one end of known space to the other, cutting the Imperium of Man cleanly in half. On one side, you have the Imperium Sanctus. That's the half that still has Terra, still has the Astronomicon, still has some semblance of organization. On the other side, you have the Imperium Nihilus, the Dark Imperium, cut off from the Emperor's psychic light, cut off from coordinated reinforcement, cut off from basically everything that makes the Imperium function. Entire sectors over there may have already fallen. Entire civilizations may have been consumed. Nobody knows because nobody can reliably get there to check. But here's where it gets complicated. The Great Rift wasn't caused by one thing. It wasn't just Abaddon smashing through Cadia during the 13th Black Crusade, though that was a massive part of it. It was a cascade failure. Cadia broke. Magnus the Red unleashed catastrophic sorcery. The Eldar god Enid partially awakened. Robout Gilliman was resurrected from stasis. Dozens of other converging catastrophes all hit at the exact same time. The galaxy didn't crack because of one hammer blow. It cracked because everything happened at once, and reality simply couldn't hold. And that's the part that should genuinely disturb you. The Imperium's own desperate acts of survival contributed to tearing the galaxy apart. Bringing back Gilliman, humanity's greatest general, the one person who might actually save the Imperium, may have helped rip open the wound that's now killing it. The cure and the disease arrived together. Before any physical fighting even began, the Rift's formation triggered the Noctis Aeterna, a period where the Astronomicon dimmed across the galaxy. Every ship traveling through the warp without that guiding light was flying blind. Uncountable vessels were lost. Entire crews vanished. Worlds that depended on supply shipments starved in the dark. The death toll from navigation failures alone was apocalyptic, and that was just the side effect of the rift opening. Then there's the time distortion. Near the Great Rift, the laws of physics stop being laws. Some worlds experience centuries passing in what feels like moments. Others are nearly frozen, trapped in temporal pockets where a single day stretches across decades. The Imperium Nihilus isn't just cut off, it's unknowable. Sending a message there is unreliable. Sending a fleet is a gamble. Even if you could reach a world on the other side, You have zero guarantee that the world you arrive at exists in the same time frame you left from. This isn't a war to be won. It's not a problem with the solution. The Great Rift is a permanent scar on reality, and the Imperium now exists as two fractured halves pretending to still be one civilization. The half with Terra is struggling to hold itself together. The half without it might already be gone. But a galaxy split in two is only a death sentence if the thing holding it together was already failing. And the Golden Throne, the device keeping the Emperor alive, and the Astronomicon burning is doing exactly that. The throne is dying. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the organization solely responsible for maintaining the most important device in human history, has been lying about it for centuries. They've secretly determined that the Golden Throne's mechanisms are failing, and they do not possess the technical knowledge required to fix them. And instead of telling the High Lords of Terra, the people who actually govern the Imperium, they covered it up. They filed false reports. They pretended everything was fine while the machine keeping humanity alive slowly broke down around them. Let that sink in. The people whose entire religion revolves around machines cannot fix this one. Here's why that's terrifying. The Golden Throne isn't doing one job, it's doing three simultaneously, and all three are degrading. First, it amplifies the Emperor's psychic power, which is what fuels the Astronomicon, the lighthouse that makes warp navigation possible across the entire Imperium. Second, it sustains his biological life, keeping his shattered body in a state that's neither alive nor dead. And third, it was originally designed to serve as the gateway to the Emperor's Webway project, the same project that Magnus the Red destroyed when he psychically breached the palace's wards, trying to warn the Emperor about Horus's betrayal. His reckless transmission shattered the protective seals and allowed demons to pour directly into the human-built Webway tunnel. That third function is now just holding a dimensional breach shot, a breach that leads directly into the warp, directly beneath Terra. If the throne fails, everything collapses in sequence. The Emperor dies. The Astronomicon goes dark. Every single ship navigating the warp loses its guiding light simultaneously. Billions of vessels stranded, entire sectors cut off from each other overnight. And then the breach opens, the one the Emperor has been holding shut with his mind for 10 millennia. A full-scale warp incursion erupts from beneath the surface of Terra itself, and humanity's homeworld is consumed. This isn't a prophecy. Nobody is interpreting ancient texts or reading tea leaves. This is a mechanical failure with the timeline. Imperial records as of 999 M41 suggest the Golden Throne may have only decades of functional life remaining. Decades, not centuries, not millennia. The Imperium of Man, a civilization spanning 1,000,000 worlds, is on a documented countdown to extinction. The clock is ticking, and the people responsible for stopping it have already admitted in secret that they can't. But here's where it gets truly painful. Recent materials from the Dark Imperium era reference Eldar involvement in attempted repairs to the Golden Throne. The Eldar, the species the Imperium has spent 10,000 years demonizing, persecuting, and attempting to exterminate at every opportunity. The species whose technology the Emperor originally borrowed from to build the throne in the first place. The fate of humanity's god, the center of their entire civilization, may now depend on the cooperation of the aliens his own institutions have been trying to wipe out since the day he sat down on that chair. 10,000 years of xenophobic doctrine, 10,000 years of suffer not the alien to live. And now the only people who might be able to keep the lights on are the ones humanity swore to destroy. That's not irony. That's a civilization being handed the bill for its own hatred. And the price is everything. The silent harvest. Everything we've talked about so far, the cosmic threats, the failing machines, the torn galaxies, they all share one thing in common. You can see them coming, maybe not in time, maybe not with enough force to stop them, but you know they're there. This one is different. A single genostellar organism can end a world. Not with claws, not with a fleet, with patience. One contact, one implantation, and the clock starts ticking on a cycle that will consume an entire planet's population from the inside out, and nobody will notice until it's already over. Here's how it works. The first generation of hybrids is born looking monstrous, barely human, hidden away in tunnels and underhives where nobody asks questions. But the second generation produces something more dangerous. Hybrids with autonomy, intelligence, and the ability to pass as human adjacent. They infiltrate local government, planetary defense forces, even ecclesiarchy congregations. By the third and fourth generation, pure strain genostealers begin emerging again, coordinating the entire network through a psychic hive mind called the brood mind. And here's the kicker: the 4th generation hybrids, they look completely human. They attend Imperial services, they work in manufacturings, they raise families, and every single one of them is waiting for a signal. Standard Imperial surveillance cannot detect a genestealer cult until the psychic signature reaches critical mass. By that point, the infection is irreversible. The population hasn't been infiltrated, it's been replaced. The Imperium's detection systems are structurally blind to this threat, not because of incompetence, but because the cult is specifically engineered to exist below the threshold of every scanning method the Imperium possesses. But it gets worse. A single genestealer doesn't just compromise one world. A splinter cult spread to nearby moons, void stations, orbital platforms, and sister worlds within the same system. One infiltration event has a realistic blast radius of multiple inhabited bodies. Entire planetary systems can fall from a single organism making contact with a single human, and then comes the day of ascension. The cult rises in open rebellion at the exact moment a Tyranid hive fleet enters the system. Imperial defenders suddenly discover that the population they swore to protect has already been converted. They're fighting a war on 2 fronts simultaneously, an internal uprising and an external invasion, and both were coordinated to the hour. The Tyranids don't conquer worlds. They harvest biomass that's already been packaged and is waiting for pickup. Every man, woman, and child on that planet is just organic material standing in neat little rows. Now think about what we covered earlier. The Great Rift has split the galaxy in half. The Imperium Nihilus is cut off from the Astronomicon, unreachable by standard communication, invisible to Imperial oversight. Thousands of colony worlds, void stations, and distant systems exist in that darkness with zero mechanism for detection or intervention. No astropathic choir can reach them. No inquisitorial task force can investigate them. They are alone. How many of those worlds are already in active infection cycles right now? How many have already celebrated their day of ascension with nobody left to send a distress signal? The answer is unknowable, and that's exactly the point. The Imperium's greatest existential threats aren't all descending from the void or pouring out of the warp. Some of them are already inside, sitting in hablocks, attending morning prayers to the God Emperor, raising children who look perfectly, completely human, waiting for a signal that's already been sent. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.